So we all know Marketplace is a place for scams. They flourish there. There's scammers, whether you're buying something or selling something, you're going to get scammed somehow, some way. A lot of it's preventable, a lot of it's not. And is an example of one that was preventable, wasn't preventable, kind of relying on the word of the person that I bought it from. And yes, I got scammed, and I got scammed bad on this skid steer. This is a Bobcat 553 with a Kubota diesel in it, and I had to replace a very, very, very major component to this skid steer immediately when I bought it, uh, and it's had some issues. So there's some things that we got to go over, figure out if there's a way that we can not get scammed on Marketplace. And let me just show you what happened to this skid steer and why it was probably a bad financial decision for me. So, if you know anything about equipment like this, heavy equipment, this is not probably considered a heavy piece of equipment. It's a compact skid steer, so it's not huge, but it's a decent sized piece of equipment, and it's kind of in that class. So, if you know much about these, you know that there is an engine, typically a diesel engine, that drives hydraulic motors that drive the wheels and that are used to operate the boom and the bucket and attachments and so forth. So though there's three on this one, there's two drive pumps that drive the wheels on this machine, and then there's the main hydraulic pump that runs the boom, the bucket, the auxiliary hydraulics over here for attachments like a grapple, anything like that. This would be where you plug in to operate whatever is in front of you here. So the most expensive thing to replace on this probably would be the engine. And thankfully, that was not the problem, but it was the next best thing. The engine in this is a 3-cylinder Kubota diesel engine, and they are a hot commodity right now. I guess kind of always have been, but they're worth a lot of money right now. A replacement engine, brand new for this skid steer, would be uh, just south of $5,000. So not something you want to replace on an old skid steer like this. This is the 2000s range, so um, 20 years old basically. So it's not new by any means, but it's something that you would hope doesn't need replaced because this only has 2,800 hours on it. So let's get into the main issue that I had to fix on this piece of equipment. So here is what happened and how I missed this issue and how he scammed me when I bought this skid steer. So I got there and pull up into the driveway. This guy's house. He's got two skid steers. He's got this one and a bigger one, and obviously he was selling this one because he got a bigger one, didn't need it no more. And that sounds all great. He used it for a while. Now he doesn't need it because he's got something better. So I had asked this guy questions on questions on questions through Messenger. We talked and talked and talked because I had been on a search for either a tractor, a skid steer, or a pickup truck with a blade to offer something to me for my business as backup for snow removal this year because last year got up their numbers on customers and commercial clients and things that I can't have a critical breakdown and be dead in the water because I have a lot of stuff that is on me to get done on a snowstorm. So last year we were upwards of, I believe, 50 driveways and about 3 or 4 commercial lots varying in size. So it was to the point where if I am dead in the water, I can't just go out and shovel my driveways by hand. I can't just go snow blow it. There is a lot to do. So this year, my plan is to go bigger in snow, more driveways, more parking lots, more of everything. Thus, I need a piece of equipment as backup. And you might think, well, this skid steer is way too small. Well, yes and no. This skid steer, I'm probably going to put a 7-foot pusher on it, which will put about 18 inches of overhang on each side of the tire. So a good size pusher on a good size pusher for a machine this size. We don't get a ton of snow here in central Iowa. We get the average storm is probably 3 or 4 inches. We don't get very many big storms, maybe 1 or 2 big ones a year. So I don't need something enormous, and I didn't want to break the budget. So I bought this skid steer, and it's going to be perfect, I think. until you get it and it's just in absolutely bad shape. So when I got there, it's sitting in the driveway of this guy's house. I had asked if it leaked. I had asked if there was funny smells. I had asked if it has blow by. I've asked all the things, and this guy seems like a straight up dude, nice guy who knows a lot about the piece of equipment. Well, unfortunately, I was lied to in a lot of ways. Um, the biggest one being I asked multiple, at least 4 times in the midst of all of these texts, because I want to be sure that this is a good piece of equipment, because I've been driving all over Tarnation looking at equipment and trucks for a while now as I was in the search for something like this for snow removal. So I knew to ask questions because I was tired of driving all over. This one was just barely 3 hours away, I believe. So I wanted to know for sure that it was good before I drive all the way out there with my truck and trailer, which is very inefficient. So I get there, and it's sitting on the driveway. There's no oil leak underneath it. There's no puddles underneath it. It starts right up. It doesn't blow white smoke. It seems like a nice skid steer, right? Well, I start looking up underneath. There's nothing dripping. There's no leaks that are visible. It's got brand new tires. It's got a bucket. It's got pallet forks. Um, it had a terrible seat in it, but he had this one that's in it now, new. He just hadn't put it in. So he's like, I'll give you this new seat for it as well. And it all sounded like a pretty good deal. So I got in it and I ran it and I operated it, and everything seemed fine. It seems to have adequate power. Um, Everything works smoothly. All the controls are good. Um, Everything's intact. Obviously, it's missing paint and stickers and things because it's 20 years old and construction equipment is not always treated the best. So it's not in bad shape for what it is, and the important things are intact. So I decide, you know what? This is the one. I'm going to buy this. I'm going to put the money in this man's hand and drive away with a new to me skid steer. Now, that's a big chunk of money that I gave this guy for this hunk of metal here. And unfortunately, I thought everything was good on it. There was no visible leaks, nothing that I could find as far as what I know to check on a skid steer and equipment before I buy something. Unfortunately, I got it home that evening. Didn't really have time to do anything with it. I pulled it off the trailer and I parked it right here, right where it is right now. And the next day, came out. I was using it a little bit in the yard, just kind of messing with it. Wanted to use it a little bit, had a little project and stuff like that to give it a little test. Come back, park it. The next morning, come out here, and I'm just looking over the machine because it's new, and I want to figure out what I know about it, and try to know the machine well. Well, unfortunately, I look underneath it, and there is a big puddle of hydraulic oil. And first thing is, oh, I blew a hydraulic line, something's loose, not a big deal. I'll figure this out, right? That's to be expected maybe on a piece of equipment like this. I can't find anything leaking. I search and I search. Finally, I'm like, all right, I am flipping up the cab and we're going to get down in there and see what's leaking. So if you don't know, I don't have this bolted right now because I just finished replacing a very big part on this. If you don't know, this can swing up the whole cab here and you can get down to the main hydraulic components and hoses and everything down inside of there. So I get down in there. There's still nothing screaming at me that's leaking. There's nothing major, no hoses, no leaks anywhere. You can just see on the bottom pan where all these things are bolted to, it's got a little low spot down the middle, obviously probably for hydraulics leaks or any leaks of any kind that the the oil will flow back towards the back of the machine and drip out instead of sitting in there. Well, I knew I could see oil there, but I couldn't find anything leaking. So I'm down there with a flashlight and I'm reaching down under stuff, trying to feel if I can find something wet with oil. And eventually I am feeling under the main hydraulic pump and it's slimy and wet. It's covered in hydraulic oil. So I asked a couple guys that are mechanics for companies as such that make this kind of equipment. And the one fellow told me that the best thing to do would be to probably buy a new hydraulic pump. There's rebuild kits, but this is kind of a one-of-one hydraulic pump. Unfortunately, that was on this machine. It's just an oddball size. They threw a couple different types in these machines, so it was hard to find the kit. So at this point, the only option was a new pump. And that's no big deal, right? I looked for pumps. I found one for $400. Okay, that's a big expense for something that's supposed to be in good shape, but it's got to be done. So I order this $400 pump, tear it all apart, go to put it in, and the spline shaft on it that drives the pump is too big. So this is where the frustration really, really sets in, because this thing's bought, paid a whole ton of money for it, to have it sitting here in the shop torn apart for 2 weeks. So I got the pump. It doesn't fit. I'm trying to figure out what to do. I contact the company that I bought the pump from and tell them that the pump doesn't fit. It's claimed it was a pump for this specific machine. Obviously, it did not have the same part number because it was not an OEM part, because they don't sell these anymore, these pumps that are on this. So I contact the company, tell them the spline shaft size, and say, hey, this is not the right thing. What do I do? Can I get my refund? And they say, sure. Can we also offer to build you a custom pump to fit your machine based off of your dimensions? And I said, absolutely. Let me send you all the measurements. I'll send you pictures and everything. So that's what I did. I sent measurements. I sent pictures, very detailed and everything, hoping to get a good pump for a decent price. So a couple weeks later, I thought they had given up on me because they hadn't said anything. I hadn't heard anything from them. Finally, I get a message. Unfortunately, we cannot build this pump for you. Our factory does not carry these part sizes or anything. So here I am, dead in the water. Once again, no pump. So I asked a buddy of mine, well, I was telling him about it, and he took it upon himself to start looking for one as well. So I had found one in Canada that had the right size spline shaft, and that's all I knew. And that was the main thing that mattered, because if the fittings don't fit, I can find new fittings fairly easily. So the spline shaft is correct, and my buddy kept looking for parts, and I believe he found one in Michigan, somewhere over there, with the exact part number of the old pump, which was fantastic, because then I knew most likely, not guaranteed, but most likely everything was going to fit. So that pump comes about a week later, and that was today. It got here today. So I go to put this in, I get it all put together, and it works. I've got everything back together. The skid steer is working again, and everything's good to go. Now, here's the problem. That the guy that scammed me, the reason I say he scammed me was because the leak came out of, it's a two-piece pump where it bolts together. The leak was coming out of there, right? So there's a gasket there. The gasket was shot, and it's a special gasket. You can't just make one or use RTV or anything. So based off of what I learned from having this thing leak for a while, is after you used it, it would leak a puddle and then stop. After you used it, it would leak a puddle and then stop. So it always leaked after the hydraulic pump had been running, building pressure, thus leaking oil out of that spot. So the guy had to have known, because that didn't just randomly happen. There was no obvious drips or anything underneath the machine. I obviously didn't flip the cab up while I was there, which I probably should have, even though that seems like a little much. That was probably would have been a good idea. But there was no oil underneath, and it didn't drip that first night. So although, granted, that first night all I did was pull it off the trailer and park it, so I didn't give it a chance to really use the hydraulic pump much at all. But I believe this guy knew, and I believe he sprayed out the everything with brake clean, wiped it off so that it didn't look like it leaked, and then didn't touch it so it wouldn't leak anymore. And then when I came and looked at it, it wouldn't leak, because all I did was run it up and down a few times, put it on the trailer, drive home. So I think that there was a major cover up on this. I don't think that there's a way that he could have hid this from me any other way because I don't believe that this was something that just happened based off of the amount of buildup and crud underneath the pump itself. It was not a new problem, which is unfortunate because he seemed like a really nice guy. But I guess they all do if they're scamming you. So let me show you the pump, uh, or part of the pump. I only have part of it in here right now. So let me show you that and kind of show you what the problem was. So here's part of the pump. It's missing the gears and then the top half because I have the rest of that stuff in the house, but I don't need that all to show you what was wrong with this. So the other side bolts on right here and is flat, and then there's the gears inside with the shaft that comes out and then goes into the engine. Well, the gasket that is built into the other side was damaged or something, but was leaking. Well, the problem is I could have maybe figured out a rebuild kit if I had searched more, but the problem was there's really bad damage inside of this pump. So that's what I'm going to see if I can get a good shot of that for you guys so you can see what I mean by that. The inside of this thing is pretty chewed up. So I don't know if you can really see that very well, but if you look in there, it's scored up really, really bad and chipped down in here and here, all just chipped up and beat up. So based off of that, a mechanic friend of mine said, you know, I would be looking for a new pump. That's just, you're not going to build proper pressure. That's going to be a problem. The pump is worn out. So, and the reason the inside of that pump was so beat up was the bushings that hold the spline shafts and the gears inside that spin to build pressure in the pump. Sorry, this is a lot of talking. The bushings that those sit in to keep them plumb and from shaking and moving around are just all falling apart in there. So they had just been kind of chipping away and throwing shards and stuff all throughout, and I believe that's what chewed up the pump. So when I replaced the new pump, I replaced the hydraulic oil filter as well. There was no metal shavings in that or anything, so it seems all right. When I replaced it, I obviously had to drain the entire hydraulic tank to do that job. So there was no metal shavings in the hydraulic oil. There's no signs of any extensive damage or any damage at all that I could find. So hopefully the pump was just its own pieces in there grinding around and beating it up. But yeah, so the new pump was a very expensive part. Uh, Not something that you want to replace on a machine that you just threw a huge chunk of money on. And I paid cash for this. I owe no money on this. So it did suck to pay a lot of money and then have to pay a bunch more money to get this part. And no, I didn't take it to a dealership. Uh, I am too cheap and I can work on stuff myself. So that's why I replaced it. I would show you down in there, but I don't want to mess with it right now. Uh, but there's a new pump in there. It was a huge process just to get my hands on this pump because it had a 1/2 inch shaft, excuse me, instead of a 5/8 shaft like the rest of them. So that kind of sucked and was frustrating, but got that figured out. So aside from that, there was no major issues other than it will need a new bucket at some point. This one's not in the greatest of shape, but it definitely will work and does just fine. But really, it as far as I know now, I've been all up in this thing. I've seen every nook and cranny. So as far as I know, everything else on this is good. May have to replace 1 or 2 axle seals at some point, but on these, that's not a huge deal. So that shouldn't be too big of a deal. But yeah, so I got lied to very, very much so by this guy. I don't think he didn't know about this. I think he knew good and well what he was selling to me and wanted to get it off of his hands and get the money in his hands and leave. So it's unfortunate. It's kind of the risk you take buying stuff on Marketplace, buying stuff in general used, even from dealerships. As far as I know right now, It's not leaking any fluids, so that's a huge win. Hopefully it stays that way and I don't find any more issues. But marketplace is a scary place, a dangerous place. Uh, so what I should have done to prevent this was flip this cab up and look down inside of there, and I would have probably noticed all that grime and stuff down inside of there. So kind of my fault, kind of not, because he cleaned it all off and made it look like nothing was dripping externally and got me that way and told me multiple times that there were no leaks, there were no issues, nothing, which was a lie, a bunch of lies. So to lie straight to someone like that is kind of something that I guess is common now, but something that I feel like um, has to be hard to do. You have to feel bad, especially when a younger guy like me shows up and wants to give you cash for something like this. You got to feel a little bit bad that you're um, scamming somebody, lying to somebody like that, um, just because you want your money and you don't care what happens to it for the other person. I mean, the bright side of this is, apart from that, I have a new hydraulic pump, so I don't have to worry about that ever, because that should last well over the life of the machine. The engine is solid and runs good. Everything about this skid steer now, as far as I'm concerned, as far as I know from this point, is everything's good. So I've used it. I used it on one tree job before I replaced the pump, and it leaked. It leaked a lot. It just drips as you're running it, and once you parked it, it drips a big puddle. But now, so far, no drips, nothing. Everything's filled up and seems to be good. I ran it for a while this afternoon, moving the boom up and down, curling the bucket, driving all over the place, trying to get fluid through everything and see if I can make anything leak. And so far, there's no signs of that. So that's a huge joy, because this thing was a big frustration. But it's good to have it going. So get ready for some videos on this. This is the debut video. Unfortunately, the way this has to be shown on the channel is the fact that I got scammed. But there will definitely be some snow plowing footage, which will be really cool. And whatever else, various jobs, landscaping, tree removal, all that kinds of stuff. So if you want to see more of that this upcoming winter and spring, subscribe. Like the video. If you've made it this far, that's impressive, because now I'm just ranting and this has been pretty long. So if you made it this far, thanks for watching. And yeah, so the skid steer is good to go right now. And there will be updates and a lot more videos about this thing. Hopefully not videos about it having problems. So thanks for watching. I will catch you on the next one. And yeah, peace out.